Let's go ahead and start the meeting, 6:31. Can we please call the roll?
Sure. Dr. Magoulias?
Yes, here.
Mrs. Reynolds? Here. Mrs. Johnson? Mrs. Johnson, are you here? You can move on. Mr. File?
Here.
Mr. Utoni?
Here.
Mr. Goebel?
Here.
Mr. Carley?
Here.
Thank you. Are there any visitors who wish to address the board? Oh my goodness. Sorry, but that was on Do Not Disturb. Okay, we'll move on to approval of consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, approval of minutes, approval of Institute for Education Innovation professional membership for the superintendent, and approve disposal of verbatim closed session minutes of the November 19th, 2018 meeting?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Utoni?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson, you are present?
Yes, I kept getting kicked off. I am here.
Excellent. Mr. Goebel? Mr. Goebel? I believe you're
Yes.
muted. Mr. Carley?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Financial reports, the investment report. Are there any, let's see, investment report, Bob.
No real big changes. Obviously, interest rates remain low. You can see the variance for the month was not that great, mainly due to receipt of transportation payments as well as special ed funding through the state. And we also received our 6th distribution of real estate tax revenue, which was a little over $316,000. So that negative number normally is much higher than that. But because of those deposits, the variance was very low this month.
Okay. Any other questions on the investment report? Okay, is there a motion to approve the bills, payroll, and treasurer's report?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions on the bills? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Carley?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mr. Utoni?
Yes.
Okay, we have presentation of the levy timeline and tax rates. Mr. McDermott?
Okay, in your packet, I included some of the slides you'll see at next month's meeting. But just to give you an idea of what you're looking at approving tonight, as well as at the December board meeting in terms of the 2020 levy for receipt in fiscal year 22. Tonight, you'll adopt a resolution for the tentative projected levy. And then in the December meeting, you'll approve the truth and taxation hearing, as well as the adoption of the actual tax levy that we will produce. Now, the actual final rate of tax levy, as well as our ending extension number, won't be known until next spring. It's kind of an odd process, but unfortunately, in December, we have to guess or estimate a high number. And then in the spring, we know our actual numbers. The next slide that I put in there was really just more info for the board in terms of what's being approved tonight, as well as the December meeting. You'll approve a resolution providing for the tax levy for year 2020, as well as a resolution allocating the 2020 tax levy dollars, and then the resolution for abatement of a portion of the 2020 taxes as it relates to the sales tax money used for debt service payments. And then the next slide that I included listed all the county school tax rates for last year's levy. And you can see Rochester is towards the lower end of those schools that are listed, with the highest tax rate being District 186 at 5.46, Pawnee being the lowest at 4.02, and Rochester at 4.38. Any questions on that or the county rates?
I'd love to see that in the paper.
We can do that.
Agreed. Okay. Are there any questions on the levy timeline and tax rate? Okay, if none, I need a motion to authorize Mr. Cox and Mr. McDermott as the representatives for Merrill Lynch and Illinois funds. Yes, Bank.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Utoni.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Any questions on this? Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel, Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius.
Yes. Okay, we have presentation and acceptance of the fiscal year 20 annual financial report.
Okay, Scott Sowers from Pillman and Dold, our independent auditors, is here tonight to highlight the fiscal year FY20 audit and financial information. So,
Thank you.
Scott.
My name is Scott. I'm going to go perform the audit again for fiscal year 20, the year of June 30, 2020. Just going to go over some highlights here. The audit report, then I'll have the final copy, and then copies of the AFO report. The main thing I want to point out is on page 1 at the bottom. The opinions, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective modified cash basis financial position for the government activities, each major fund and the aggregate remaining fund information of Rochester Community Unit School District number 3A, Rochester, Illinois, as of June 30, 2020, and the respective changes in modified cash basis financial position for the year then ended in accordance with the basis of accounting described in note 1. All that long-term jargon just means that you guys got a clean opinion. We didn't have any findings, no issues, no material misstatements or anything of that nature. Just some other highlights that you'll find as you go through here. Over expenditure of budget, there's an item in there in the MD&A there. The largest one here is in the debt service fund. It shows it's overexpended by about $6.5 million or more. The reason for this is because a new bond came in and it paid off an old bond. So the expenditure to pay off the old bond was more than what was on the budget. That's typical when you have a new bond. The other two funds are transportation and IMRF that were overexpended, and that was by an immaterial amount, less than $100,000. That's kind of typical over the last few years we've seen. Another thing to point out in the AFR report, not in this bound report, you all have copies of, but in the ISB report, the financial profile score, I believe it was 3.7 or so. I don't have it in front of me, but that spits out recognition in the scoring basis for the financial profile. So I think it's been there a few years, so I think that's good. There's no deficit reduction plan, no negative fund balances. Bob, I gave him 2 letters for the board. One's a statement on accounting standards, which just basically talks about what it describes what different issues that can come up, such as disagreements with management, trouble getting documents, things like that. Also describes that we didn't have any issues like that or any concerns there. So that's a pretty bland letter just for you guys. The management comment letter that we gave you, it's pretty similar to last year. The capital outlay expenditures, sometimes we have to adjust those. Basically, because the policy states that 2,500 is the capital threshold to capitalize an item in school per policy. Sometimes some smaller items get lumped in there, like if you buy 5 computers for $2,600, each one of those items is less than $2,500, so we move those around. We also do a non-attest service to prepare that for you, so that's nothing that you guys have done on your end. That's just recommendations for future use, and that's gotten a lot better over the last few years, I will say. Let's see here, a couple of other things. Oh, the economic interest statements. Last year, there was a comment in the management letter because one of them wasn't filed. I believe it was the superintendent. This year, that was fixed, so that came off of that management comment letter. Anybody has any questions or anything, I can go over that. Another thing that I need to point out is next year for fiscal year 21, all student activity and other agency funds that are in the school have to be on the state budget and the AFR reports. So that's a new thing with the state this year. So what that's going to do is it's going to throw a bunch of money onto your financial statements that wasn't there before. So that combined with, having a year like this, different than every other year, looking at comparative things, that just throws another wrench in there that, it's hard to compare year to year just because of that change. So that's something to look forward to on that, because those normally weren't included on there in the financial statements, but now they're required to be. Anybody have any questions?
Oh, that sounds good. Very good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Scott.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
How much, may I ask, how much
Yeah.
bond debt are we
So,
carrying
thanks,
right
Tim.
now?
Say again, Mr. File?
How much bond debt are we carrying right now? We move on through is that in there, that chart, that
35,140,000.
25?
35 million.
35,
Yeah.
35
I mean, it's
million.
still pretty high.
140 now. Obviously, it'd be a little bit less than that going through this year, but
Mhm.
Mr. File, just to clarify on that, what Mr. Utoni said as well as being pretty high, being a property or a PTEL district, we have the debt service extension base. That capacity that we have bonded out is pretty much our max.
Yeah.
We could do, don't hold me to the exact number, but we could do about $500,000 of working cash fund or refunding bonds, and then we would be maxed. So that's not a lot of
Slack.
yeah, slack to move forward.
Now, we don't have to have an act of the legislators though to do something.
Legislatures are taxpayers,
Yeah. We had that a while.
neither
back.
of which is very likely right now.
I can't see your smile.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want, it's every year in their plan.
Yeah, it's in there. It's down. It was 36 million something the year before, so we
Yeah.
paid it down some.
Yeah, luckily we're at the point today that's not a necessity. So
At least we have a little something in there.
yes,
I'll just add that that hurts our recognition thing too, because we get kind of penalized because our debt's so high.
yeah, in that formula that the state
Yes.
uses,
Yes.
Yeah.
every other category, we're at the highest level.
Right.
And in debt, we're at the lowest rating. So that's why that 3.7 average, they average those
Yeah.
4 categories.
I knew that wasn't the top, so, yeah. But I didn't expect it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, we will move on to administrator reports. The administrator and director reports are included in your packet. Are there any questions or comments on those reports? I do have one. I feel I saw Mr. Ashbaugh here in person. I just want to know, would you, if he doesn't hear this, would
he's
you-
coming in.
Yes,
in
somewhere.
just a
isn't
few
he?
minutes. Yeah, we're only allowed the 10. So
Can we ask him to include like numbers for remote only and hybrid in his monthly report? The other buildings do, and it's helpful to kind of get a glimpse as we're looking over our board packets on where each school may have changed and how things have evolved.
and our high school number is growing. So
Yeah.
he does have that, and I'm sure he's
Yeah,
on and can hear
so
that too.
I'd like to see that in
Oh,
there.
yeah. How about
Yeah,
you?
me too.
Okay.
What's growing? Remote number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everywhere. At the high school, the fastest, but we're also seeing it grow at our elementary levels right now as well.
Mhm.
I am on here, but I don't know if you can hear me, so.
Yes, we can.
Brent, do you have that number? Mr. Ashbaugh, do you have that number handy? Let's move forward. I can
Yeah,
get it
no
for you.
problem. Yeah, that's no problem. And just
Oh.
moving forward, the rest of this, for
Yeah,
each
sure.
month,
Sorry.
that's all I was.
311.
311.
311 remote students.
Wow.
That's
Out
high.
of 700? Wow.
Yeah,
Between remote and quarantine, approximately, this isn't the exact number, but we're hovering around that 50%.
Yes,
That are not in school.
769 students.
Wow.
How many?
300.
700 and something though.
That's total 700 and some.
Probably said 59.
Yeah, 759.
769.
Oh, 69.
Close enough.
okay. Thank you. Okay, anything else? If not, we'll move on to Mr. Cox for the superintendent's report.
Sure. Thank you. First, yesterday marked School Board Member Appreciation Day, and I'm not going to read the entire piece that I wrote into your report for expediency, but I also sent that to the paper as an editorial. But on behalf of myself as superintendent, but certainly our district and building administration, our teachers, staff, students, want to thank you for everything you do as school board members. It's never an easy job. It's thankless service in a lot of aspects, but I've believed this my entire career, but especially as a superintendent, that being a school board member is one of the highest forms, if not the highest form of community service that one can do. And this year, it's really difficult. I'm sure a few of you didn't know what you were signing up for whenever you were appointed in the middle of the COVID crisis, but I think it's also highlighting the necessity of school board members and what you balance between what's best for kids and doing right by our kids, serving our staff, serving our community and parents, and serving our taxpayers. It's certainly a lot of things to consider as we move forward. And I just want to thank you for what you do as school board members. Rochester has a long history of having a strong board of education, and you're certainly carrying that forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
No audience, so we have to clap for ourselves, right? Also, another point of, and you have the nice gift box
thank you
from
very
Cocoa
much.
Blue and the
Lavalier?
tags. Yeah, the lanyards at your place. So thank you, Katie, for getting those together. And to our board members who are attending remotely, we'll make sure those get delivered to you as well. Also, this week marks American Education Week, and it's just time to celebrate what's great and good about education. The IEA spearheads American Education Week, but certainly everyone celebrates that. We're highlighting the great work and the importance of our teachers, but also all educators across the board and everything that our educators, our teachers, our support staff, our administrators do in education to serve our students. Again, we know that education is the key and a cornerstone to what we do as a democracy. It's important to our kids, to our parents, but also our community. It's the foundation and center point of many of our communities, if not all, certainly this community. Our schools really are a centerpiece of what we do here. And so what our teachers do is extremely important. This year, again, highlights just the challenges of that. Whenever the challenge is out there and when our kids need us and our community needs us, our teachers, our educators, our support staff answer the call every time. I'm proud of the work they do. It's certainly not easy. It's exhausting. Everyone's looking forward to a little bit of a break next week, but it's not just the work that we're doing. It's also what I hear from our teachers is, I just hope, I hope I'm serving my kids and reaching my kids, reaching my students. And it's that passion, that love for our students is what makes us a great school. So we are meeting with our teachers on Wednesday, or not meeting, we are visiting with our teachers on Wednesday. We have treats for them as well, and a token of appreciation from the board to all of our district staff. So myself and Suzanne and Jennifer and even Mr. McDermott are going to make some hand deliveries on behalf of the Board of Education for our staff this week. So again, we want all of our staff and our teachers to know that your work is appreciated and recognized.
Yes, thank you for doing that for all of us.
Mr. Cox, I thought I saw in the news tonight the IEF, or one of the international and state educational people unions, were calling for statewide mandate for all schools. They wanted the state to run the schools, and they were suggesting all online. Did you know anything about that, or have you heard that?
The only thing I've heard, Mr. File, not necessarily running schools. The only thing I've heard was last week, maybe Friday, that the IEA had released a survey, and they were planning on doing a town hall to share the results of the survey. This survey is something we all need to be certainly concerned about, because it gives an insight to how difficult things are this year, and how teachers across the board are feeling. And I've not seen the final. In fact, I'm not sure if all of the associations across the state have completed it yet. So I don't know if this meeting took place, but what we were told on Friday is that statewide, 35% of teachers are considering leaving the profession and or do not feel safe in the current environment. As a result, the IEA was expected to, but I've not heard confirmed, but expected to talk about doing some type of remote learning for a short period of time while we're in the height of this pandemic right now, but not for the long haul, But we've not heard anything. I don't know that that meeting took, or that Facebook Live event took place or not, but I could reach out to our local to see if that did happen. I kind of looked for it, but certainly have attention to it, because it does give some insight to how people are feeling right now.
Just what I caught on the newscast, and I wasn't paying that much attention. I was looking at the paper at the same time, but something about, if we do this, we'll never get ahead of it unless we do this, and then that will lead to better days ahead. That was the logic that I caught. I might be wrong, but that, I think, was on Channel 20 News at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, we'll certainly, I think, see more discussions like that as we move forward between now and probably Martin Luther King Day, would be my expectation.
Okay. Just so you're aware.
Yeah, there was an article that came out, and I confirmed it was the Illinois Teachers Union called on Pritzker to close school buildings again because of the surge. And that came out just around 5 today.
There's the IEA and the IFT are probably together on that.
There was two 3-digit things.
So you have statewide, you have the Illinois Education Association, the Illinois Federation of Teachers. Locally, we are IEA. And then nationally, you have the NEA and the AFT nationally for that. And that's a pretty common thread among those. So it's certainly cause for concern. The other piece that I didn't mention, that as a management alliance, we're working in collaboration with IEA and IFT, is a call for statewide metrics. What we're asking for and have been asking for, and that's something management and both unions are working on together, is a statewide metric to show when we can be remote or in person. And your in person will be dependent on you locally, whether it's full or hybrid. But we're asking for that metric. Right now, it's just left up to us. We're getting zero guidance from any medical entity, which is a very, very difficult position for us as schools and educators to be put in. And again, that survey is being used in part to lobby for a set of statewide metrics, which would be, I can tell you, would be very helpful. I would welcome it with open arms.
I can tell you it's the same with the individuals. I tested positive 10 days ago. Public health still hasn't reached out to me for any contact tracing whatsoever.
That would be another example of the challenges we're facing here internally. So next, to carry this on, winter sports, IHSA and IESA basketball. For the context of this conversation, I'm really talking about high school winter sports for our district. By and large, it affects basketball. Our low risk activities can still move forward. I've written to you at length about this issue, so I will paraphrase some of that instead of going into it all. But in short, the IHSA in a turn of events came out and said, schools go forth and play. The IHSA holds no liability, responsibility, nor any power per se. The IDPH and the IDPH guidelines and the mandates from the governor's office are clear that high-risk sports have a specific set of guidelines. Basketball has been moved to high risk, which means they cannot even do a contact scrimmage. It would essentially be running and weightlifting is what they could do. Going against those guidelines, I've included in this report the brief from our legal counsel, the brief from our insurance. Bob did some work on our insurance for us as well to get that in. We do not have coverage in either. Also, it could be a position where board members individually or individuals who would blatantly go against those guidelines could be held individually responsible and could result in potential licensure issues for the educators involved that would be doing that. So in short, we can't play, kids can't play, as difficult as that is, until basketball is, or any sport that's deemed high risk is medium risk, or there's some type of change. In response to this, as you know, myself and some other superintendents had reached out to the governor's office and the IDPH asking for a voice at the table. There will be an interview tonight on Channel 20. I think there's one now, and probably later tonight they'll show it again, where I did talk to them today, and I stressed that we are not here to defy the IHSA. We're not here to defy the governor's office, the IDPH. Simply, as educators, as superintendents, we want a voice at the table to be a part of the solution, because we feel like that's been missing in many of these instances, especially in this specific instance, where we have specific expertise on the educational value of what we do, but also on the logistics. We know there are some solutions, potential or some solutions that's been discussed that those players don't know how to implement that we do. And we may be open to some solutions that they would find surprising, because we know the importance of moving forward. We've centered that request and for that voice at the table to continue to advocate for our kids, because ultimately we are going to be back. And you've heard me say, you've read my writing, though our plans adapt and change, our goal never does, and that's to get kids back in school. Well, the same is for activities. And I don't want to talk sport specific here. It's all activities. It's sports, it's music, it's drama, it's our clubs. Everything that we can do for kids, we want to do, and we want to be able to do safely. In the context of this conversation, and it sparked a great deal of controversy, as you can imagine, because there are districts that say, we're playing. No matter what, we're going to play. We're not in that position, but we want to continue to advocate to move forward. In doing so, we've centered it around 3 talking points. One of those is safety. We do feel that we can do this safer. You'll never hear me say the word safe, but safer. Our kids are playing. They are playing right now without us. They're out of state, travel, club, you name it, they're doing it. There is not the mitigations in place in those organizations that would be placed in our schools, where we have checks and balances and accountability, from administration to athletic directors to coaches who are professional coaches, that will follow a safer mitigation strategy and plan. As evidenced, what's happening within our schools that we'll talk about in just a few minutes, what's happening in our schools is reflective of that. And we just don't see a huge rate of community spread within our athletic programs as compared to what's happening outside of school. The other piece is we will employ caution when caution is due. Earlier this year in the fall, for example, we had a fall sport, a junior high school sport, that we put on an adaptive pause for 2 weeks out of an abundance of caution, because we could not contact trace. Now, we ended up not having additional positives come out of that, but it was still out of an abundance of caution. Currently, we have all activities on pause through Thanksgiving, because all they're able to do at the moment is run and weight train. So we just put a pause on that, because we see a little bit of a surge here, and we thought abundance of caution. We're not seeing that on the outside. So we do feel like we can offer a safer option for our kids. The other piece is we're seeing a number of our students go remote for those reasons, to be able to compete in the out-of-state travel club, because there's a concern about coming to school, being a close contact, and getting quarantined. If you have those options here, and if that we'll get to again in a few minutes, testing becomes a part of those options, that defeats that purpose. It brings our kids back to where we are, and provides that resource that our kids desperately need. The next piece is an equity, which I won't hammer that, but the equity piece of this is those who can will, and those who can't won't. So we have kids that have opportunities and kids that don't, and equity is always at the forefront of our discussions and decisions at the district and school levels. And the last but not least piece is the social emotional component of being able to offer those. Today, I'm sorry, today was supposed to be the start of winter season. It has come and went, and I'm disappointed to report we have had zero feedback. I realize there's a lot going on. There are major important things. We recognize today, in 2 weeks from now, we would not be playing some of these activities because of the way cases are. We do feel like there's a way for us to, in a safer manner, at least participate to some manner, even if that's internally, like we did with some of our fall sports and some of those spring sports that were canceled. We were able to do some things internally, practice-wise. So we do feel like there's some things we could do, and we'd just like to have a discussion. Are there any questions on the winter sports piece?
This isn't a question, but I just want to say thank you for, fighting to be at the table for decision making, because I think it's important that schools and districts are represented there. So thank you.
I also want to say that I think it's great, as you articulated, that you're looking at keeping things equitable, because there are opportunities that club kids are getting and that the rest of them are not.
Yes.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move into safety mitigations. We do have a face covering policy that we've adopted, the board's adopted earlier this year. I don't believe the most recent recommendations from the IDPH requires a change in the policy, but I just wanted to make the board aware. And of course, I've written it in reports and communicated with our community. In order to continue to provide a safer environment, we are getting more diligent about what we're doing with our face coverings, specifically in terms of net gaiters. It's been recommended not to use net gaiters inside, that the face coverings need to be a mask that fits tightly around the nose and mouth. We're encouraging people to wear those properly. And if people do come to school, students or staff come to school with the gaiter, we'll ask them to put on a mask, or we'll give them a mask. We're not making it an issue. I'm not aware of any staff that are wearing gaiters inside, and with students, we do have a little bit of that, but we were allowing it. So it's just an education piece that we have going. Outdoors, it's still a different thing for some of our sports events, especially when we get to the spring season when it warms up. If we're still doing this, we'll be able to wear the gaiters. So that's one thing that we have done. The next piece, and we're just doing this for a short period of time through Christmas, and we'll see where we go from there. IDPH has recommended that schools close workrooms and require individuals to eat in the rooms or outside, socially distanced when in a group, to just to decrease the result of COVID spread. Statewide, we're seeing an increased risk of COVID spread or close contacts as a result of workrooms and eating. We are also seeing that internally in our district. We have had some instances where we've had to quarantine close contacts of COVID positive individuals because of instances like this. Now, I want to be very clear, people are not doing anything wrong. It also becomes an education piece. And because things are surging as badly as they are right now, in the greater community as a whole, we just need to be more diligent, because in order to keep our kids in school, we have to have staff. And at the moment, it's staff that would cause us to go on an adaptive pause more quickly than the student body. We had 39 staff out on Friday. I can tell you that if that was the fact, if that would have been the case 4 or 5 days in a row, there was 2 buildings, I'm not sure we could have kept it up. But because of the way we had people coming back this week, it worked out. So that's what prompted my message to our community is, along with what's going on in the community as a whole, hey, be ready for an adaptive pause, have a backup plan. And again, let me be clear. Nobody's doing anything wrong. Our staff is doing an excellent job of taking care of our kids and themselves, as referenced by some data we can show. But the reality is, as much as things are surging, unless you go anywhere besides your classroom and your home, there's a chance you're going to become a close contact. So I just want to be very clear. Nobody's doing anything wrong. We're just trying to be extra diligent and extra safety minded, at least to Christmas, and then we'll reboot and see what's going on. Testing. As a part of this basketball discussion or winter sports discussion, we have been made aware that there is a possibility to be able to do testing to an extent. It is Binax antigen tests. We were made aware that the federal government had issued those to the state of Illinois, whom passed them on to our local health departments. And these tests are available for schools, and that's the purpose of these tests for schools. The Binax antigen tests are the only antigen test that's been approved by the IDPH as actionable, meaning we can quarantine or act on the negative. Either way, they are, this data is escaping me. I believe for symptomatic individuals, they are 97 to 98% accurate. For asymptomatic individuals, they are 90% accurate. The test is a rapid test that can be administered here on site at school. We are looking at our nurses and our athletic trainer to be able to administer these tests. They are a 15-minute test. And in order to set them up, we need a standing order from a physician, which I'm currently working. We have a meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. We have to have a CLIA waiver, which allows us to be a testing site. And then we have to get the individuals trained who'd actually be administering the testing, which is available on the IDPH website for free. So we're working through that. The question will be, how many tests do we get? In the short term, until we know exactly how many tests we get, we would be looking at testing symptomatic individuals only. We're not looking to what I would call COVID mine and test everybody. Plus, I don't think we have the capacity to be able to do that. But we could at least do a symptomatic test if somebody came down and the parent consented. The other piece I omitted, a big piece, is there would be an opt-in. It would be an opt-in only. People would not be required. Parents would have the ability to opt in, and I have to work with legal counsel on that opt-in as well. But I've talked to them, and they have some examples where they've done this in some other schools. There's some schools in the collar counties that are doing this. Different program, but similar. If we get enough tests, there's a possibility, and just note possibility, this is not a for certain thing, but if we could get enough tests, it could be a potential where we could do a weekly test of student athletes as well, which may help move that thing along. But certainly that's going to be, if that moves to a statewide program, that's going to be a pretty hefty lift. But to go reference the points I said earlier from a safety standpoint, our students are playing without us. They're going out of state. They're going to different economies. There's a lot of things that go into that. If we could get people back home, we can isolate those cases. We can identify those cases. It allows us to move forward better. So more to come there. Depending on how this all rolls out, we may need to do a special meeting. We may be doing a special, we're going to need to do a special meeting anyway for some personnel hires. If not, it would be the December meeting, but that's all assuming we can get these things to work out. But that is a positive turn of events. Hopefully we can do this. And special meeting, we do need to have a special meeting in December on some personnel. I don't have a date yet, so Katie will be reaching out to you that on dates. We got to get through some more interviews for that. And then, last but not least, with this, and I'll get into it more in just a few minutes, but we are not looking for sympathy as educators, just a little empathy, especially for our staff. This is really hard, what everybody's doing, but Also, one of the positive things is that as bad as things seem, and I even fall into this trap, I'm sending out these notifications almost daily that we have positive tests. And I even got to that point where, boy, this is really, really bad. And I'm not underplaying this either, because it is, and it is of great concern. But I'm also, when I step back and look, that less than 1% of our population right now is COVID positive, and that's a concern for those individuals that are. It's also a celebration that our mitigations that we have in place are working, that people are being diligent. It's not perfect all the time, but we're helping each other out. We're trying to hold each other accountable and continuing to move forward together. And that's the big message. As difficult as this is, and we have to listen to each other, listen to our differences, listen to our concerns, talk solutions together. But ultimately, we have to move forward together. And I'm really proud of our staff, because that's what we're doing. It's just not an easy task. So that's all I have for the report. If there's any questions.
I assume that test is the saliva test, right?
I don't believe so.
No, it's not.
No,
Oh.
I believe it's a nasal swab. Don't hold me to that. But the only reason I say that is because one of the questions in talking with one of our nurses and, you know, asking their thoughts and concerns and questions they would have was just that, if there, you know, what would happen if there is any type of injury or damage from doing the nasal swab. But my understanding is it's not the brain tickler. It's a, but I may be wrong on that.
I can tell you you're right. I had the brain tickler back in June, but the one I had 10 days ago, they just swabbed the bottom of both your nasal cavities.
Okay. I believe that's what we're looking at with the Binax tests. I'm going to learn more tomorrow. So
The University of Illinois is pioneering the saliva test. And obviously in our community, they're doing it at the hospitals. I've spoken to them, and they're trying to reach out to businesses. The reality is they haven't had great success with businesses in the community, schools. The cost is an issue. And the biggest concern, even setting aside cost, is whether the test is actionable, how it will allow you to keep kids in school, how it will allow you to keep businesses running. So, you know, even if you test every day, it doesn't, you know, given the course of the virus, it makes it hard. So a lot of nonprofits, a lot of businesses, actually almost none have taken it because it just doesn't, you know, if you're doing social distancing, wearing masks, cleaning, looking at the air conditioning systems, those seem to be the most powerful approach. And testing is another tool, but it doesn't really replace those other issues.
I spoke with the University of Illinois about those tests. It was $20 to $21 per test.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do it with any sort of fidelity, at minimum, you need to be testing once per week. Ideally, it would be twice per week. So you can just start doing the math real quick, and it's not, it's just not feasible. Mr. Carley's correct on the actionable piece. The University of Illinois asked me what price point would it take. And I mean, we are miles apart on what that price point is. And I said, look, we're able to do hybrid instruction without this, and we have pretty good data to support that. So we'll stick to mask, cleaning, distancing to the best of our ability.
Okay, let's move on to old business. We have the approval of memorandum of understanding with Hazel Health for pediatric telehealth services. Mr. Cox, will you tell us what you've learned in the last month on this since our last discussion?
Yes, following our last board meeting, we did have a meeting with our district nurses, with our district level nurses, and Mrs. Shaw, Mrs. Keller was in that meeting as well, just to go through their specific questions, because they're the ones that would be administering this and working through this. The biggest question that our nurses have, as far as any of the procedures and the actual thing, I think everybody recognizes this is a positive program, a positive service to be able to offer to our students. From their standpoint, there's this question of, is there time to do this along with everything else that we're doing now? Ultimately, we do believe this is something we can move forward with that will be a good benefit to our parents and students now and later. The other piece we looked into and that we stressed with them was the question, someone had brought up a concern, I believe it was Mr. Goebel at the last meeting, what happens if somebody's coverage changes, their Medicaid status changes, their insurance status changes. We got that written into the agreement, but they do, I don't remember the proper technical term, but Hazel Health runs the same type of system that your doctor's office would run. And so they do that same day or same service verification, where if your insurance is no longer covering you, it notifies them. They do not move forward without getting the updated information from the parent, or the parent agrees to pay cash price. The last piece was the cash price of the visit. Currently, co-pays are waived during the COVID this year, during 2020, 2021. In the future, co-pays would be $20. The total cash price for a visit is $45. There is a program through Hazel Health that if a student does not have Medicaid coverage or insurance coverage, if they are in a free and reduced lunch status, there is a program through Hazel Health that would still offer them the services. They do not want to deny coverage if they don't have to. And again, this is all opt-in by parents to be able to do this.
Questions and comments?
Nope, just I appreciate you addressing my concerns.
And ultimately, we'll find out how much it's used by parents. If it's not a service we use, there it is. I mean, it's a year agreement. It's a year-to-year agreement.
Good.
So we would just need to give 30 to 60 days notice.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with Hazel Health for pediatric telehealth services? I was charging my bell. I don't think that was a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius.
Yes. Next, we have the approval of student fee rates for College Now, and I think Mr. Ashbaugh is coming in.
Yes, sir.
Is he here? Oh, hello down there. Didn't see you sneak in here.
Snuck in.
Okay, so we have information that was in your board packet on this. Mr. Cox and Mr. Ashbaugh, do you want to
Yes.
take this?
I will kick it off, and I want to thank Mr. Ashbaugh and his team at the high school for doing quite a bit of work on this over the past month. Following our discussion at the previous board meeting, representatives from our teachers and our high school counselors, Mrs. Keller, Mr. Ashbaugh, Mr. Tolan, myself, we got together and just talked about College Now, you know, where we were, where we are, and where we see things moving in the future. Following that meeting, I asked Mr. Ashbaugh, I actually reached out to Dr. Bertrand, who was the superintendent whenever College Now started, and just talked to him a little bit about how it started, what we were looking at, what we were thinking short and long term, which was very helpful in the conversation. And then I reached out to Mr. Ashbaugh and asked him to put together some information to share with the board. He and his team of counselors really did a nice job of putting some stuff together. So I will turn it over to him to share some of that with us.
Do you have that or no?
I don't think
No.
we can display that.
Well,
It's in the packet. But
yeah, the big thing in there, if you look at, is in 2016, we had 13 classes of dual credit for 50 credit hours. Next year, we will have 6 classes for 24 credit hours. So I guess my thing I just want you guys to understand is that we actually earned more hours last year from College Now than we did for dual credit, which is the first time ever that there was more for that. I think with dual credit getting a little harder to do and having teachers that are qualified, it's really it's making College Now that much more important. I want you guys to know I totally understand the cost thing. That's not my thing. I just know that this program right now is really an important thing, I think, in our school, especially to transition until we maybe could find more teachers that can teach dual credit. on the last one in there, if you looked, I did do a price comparison of Lincoln Land, and even paying full cost at Lincoln Land, they would be paying $1,500. And if you looked, I did U of I at Champaign, I did Illinois College, I did Illinois Wesleyan, I think Illinois State. And my thing is, even paying, they're still getting a tremendous value, and they're also getting college credit while they're still in high school, while it's counting as high school credit. I did want to share something with you. I was playing around on the Illinois school report card today, and I did find this interesting, that the only school that I believe in this area that compares to us as far as our students earning college credit is Springfield High. They're twice as big as us, and they got about twice as many students that are earning college credit. Chatham, they're high too, but they, again, twice as much of us. But everywhere else, our kids are, I mean, I think it makes Rochester very attractive that we're offering this to our kids. And those of you who have had kids go through know what a benefit it is to once they go to college. So I just wanted you to know that I think it's really important program to remain, no matter who's paying or whatever. I think it's a great program.
The cost of 12 semester hours at Lincoln Land is $1,800. Illinois State is $5,892. The University of Illinois is $9,288. Illinois College is $12,180, and Illinois Wesleyan is $19,200. So I agree with Mr. Ashbaugh that offering the program is there's twofold. As we looked at this originally as a district, we had said we're not going to offer something at College Now that our kids could get here, and we've been able to honor that. But then the other piece is to offer that extra piece. That's, that extra, component of education for our kids. Again, we have kids who are, could be certainly not necessarily, college may not be something they were thinking about, and College Now may be that track, them getting that experience in high school is helping them with that as well.
I think I mentioned this last time, but I do want you to think about this too, is that I think in 2018, 70% of the students that went to College Now were not in the top 30% of their class. Yeah. And so I think we're reaching more people by offering both modes. Some kids are taking such high level dual credit here that College Now doesn't work for them, but I think it does work, and it's really good for kids who are maybe thinking about going to college. Maybe it's a good track for them to think about. So
as we look at the total cost of College Now on the recommendation sheet, I included that in your packet for FY21. We can see that since FY19 to FY21 in 3 years, that cost has grown from $121,000 to $283,000. In my world, in Mr. McDermott's world, we try to keep predictable costs. This is obviously showing that it's not a predictable cost in terms of tuition. The other piece that's not predictable is the amount of students actually in the program, which has grown exponentially too. I don't believe I have the history of how many students are in the program. Oh, I do. It went from 73 students to 149 students. So when you couple that enrollment growth along with the tuition growth, it became a cost that nobody could have anticipated 3 years ago. We went from an annual cost for the district of $106,945 to $223,792 was the cost increase for the district. Based on the meeting we had with our representatives from RHS, along with what we're looking at currently and projecting to look at forward, you'll hear this is going to be a recurring theme for, unfortunately, board meetings for the foreseeable future. We do expect very difficult days as we move forward from a financial aspect. We would like to continue to offer the program of College Now, but we'd recommend making that a family responsibility and then providing some assistance for students who may be at our free and reduced lunch rate. We do not want to eliminate the opportunity for those individuals to be able to have access to that program, but we'd be looking at 100% financial responsibility on the family for College Now beginning in FY21. We would not do that in the spring because those parents those students signed up under a different set of expectations and parameters.
I was trying to remember why we made the initial cost so low. Did we think the program was going to be so small and not take off? Is that why we did the cost so low? Anybody was around here when we did the initial cost?
The best I can figure, Mr. Utoni, and this is just trying to connect the dots. That was a piece of it that we didn't expect the growth.
Yeah.
We also didn't anticipate the tuition increase, at least to that extent. Everybody knows tuition is going to increase. And also, I think financially, in FY19, we were in a better time.
Yeah.
Because that was 1 year. I mean, FY 18 is when the financial picture started turning for the better for a few years for school districts. Evidence-based funding was passed in the fall of 17. Things were going pretty well. So I think we felt like we had the ability to do that, to get this program going, and to offer to our students and families.
I think
And
that I
Dr.
can tell you-
Bertrand told us that we would save some money as well. Because
That
we
comes through if we, yes, if the way you would save money is if you reduced staff.
Yeah.
The district has not done that. And I know we have staff on here, would rather not. So
I think the cost thing too had a lot to do, and it's probably partially my fault and Dr. B together, but we kind of associated College Now with dual credit. And so we were charging this for dual credit, so we automatically charged it for College Now, when I think they are two, now that I know the program better, they're two totally different things. And I think that's where the original cost came from, Mr. Utoni. So
Thank you.
the thing we have to stress with parents, if the board approves this recommendation, the thing we have to stress to parents is this is still an incredible opportunity at an incredible value. And we can take paths to work with families, that we can set up payment plans. There's a lot of different things we can do. We don't have to have all of that right up front because the district still pays the bill. Lincoln Land would rather the district pay the bill, and then that revenue from the families would have to come, or not revenue, but the cost for that program, because we're not looking to make money off of this. We just need to have it be a flow-through agent.
Do dual credit courses have any cost to the district?
other than you are paying a teacher to teach,
Yeah.
and it would be one of their 6
it's-
classes. So technically
they
there is a
teach.
cost to you because they're teaching that class.
There isn't a fee
No.
to the district.
Students are responsible for their own books.
Yeah. Okay.
I had a couple comments. I mean, Mr. Ashball, thank you so much for putting all this material together. It was really helpful. And I think it's wonderful that we give the students the flexibility to do the College Now program. And I appreciate the additional insights. I had a question along the same lines about just the dual credit. It looks like about 5 years ago, we had 7 teachers that could do it and it dropped down. Was that just through retirements, or is there, a strategy to add more teachers down the road that have that? Or is it, how do we, increase the number?
It's been different, believe it or not. We've had one that we had issues with Lincoln Land. We had another one that the teacher moved away. We have another one that the teacher is retired and will be re-retiring for the second time at the end of this year. So I think that's what's more put the squeeze on it than anything is that. And for teachers to do it, they have to be working towards a master's in that area and have at least half of it done, I believe, before they are qualified. And it has to be in that specific area too.
Very specific.
Mr. Ashball is being pretty politically correct on it too. It's not a Lincoln Land issue. It's a community college issue in general. I've been in 3 different community college districts, and it's the same as the goalposts do move for the teachers who are able to teach that. So you may have a teacher who's able to teach dual credit today, that next year they're not able to teach that because they do at times move that goalpost of what those are. And that has to do with their accreditation. That has to do with some of their enrollment figures, finance, all of those different type of things that the community college deal with. And it's not it's not being critical. It just is what it is.
Yep.
That's something that's happening at our community college throughout the state, that we're seeing teachers able to teach dual credit lower. I actually had a teacher once who had a PhD and was not able to teach dual credit.
That's why we brought to you 2 years ago, we added 2 AP classes. And we actually added a third one this year because we had a teacher move from one school to the other. So it's still to give those kids the opportunity in those classes, maybe while we're trying to bridge to, find that way, but it's still giving them the opportunity.
Are we losing another one at the end of this year then? Another course or
Yes.
credit opportunity?
Yes. A teacher who retired 3 years ago, who's been kind enough to stick around to do the dual credit for the last 3 years, is going to retire for a second time. So, yes.
Are there any teachers who have expressed an interest in becoming certified to teach a dual credit and that they're on their way with their master's plan to be able to do it?
I have a few that have expressed interest. However, they have not started. So even in the scheme, if you think of it this way, as they're working a job trying to do 30 hours of college to get that, they would need, here's the thing, if they get a master's, they have to have 30 hours. If they have a master's in something else, then they can get 18. So they have to have a master's either way, either in the subject area or have so an example, a teacher that has an administrative master's could go back and get 18 hours of something to teach. But if you think about that's taking maybe one course a semester, maybe in a summer, it's still a 2 to 2.5 year process. So
nobody's really close at this point.
correct.
No. And that may be, Mrs. Johnson, that may be something that we have to have discussions in the future about how, can we work? And our teachers do have some ideas. They've talked with us about some things we could maybe look for in the future, but it's not going to be just an immediate fix. But I think there's mutual interest among staff and us as administration and board to see what we can do to continue to offer opportunities and have our teachers be able to teach those courses.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just received a text from one of my teachers that's out there listening that said they will be done with their master's in 8 months. So I missed one, Mr.
All right.
Johnson. So yeah,
All right.
so
Way to keep them honest,
already.
whoever that
I
was.
felt my phone in my pocket. I thought somebody's probably told me I did something,
That's an
Yes.
example of Rockets taking care of Rockets right
That's
there.
right.
Mr. Ashmoth's
That's
teacher's
right.
taking care of him.
Right.
We need a motion to approve that?
Yes, we need a motion to approve the memorandum of we need a motion to approve the student fee rates of for the College Now program.
I'll make
the
that
motion.
motion.
And I should clarify, we're looking at 2 different recommendations
I was gonna make a motion to 100%
for 100%.
And I'll
Okay.
second that.
recommended.
Okay.
One,
Is that-
one of the Amy's, I'm not sure. What was that,
I think
Mrs.
that was
Johnson?
Reynolds
Johnson.
seconding.
We both did it, so Amy Reynolds can have it.
Okay. Okay, so this is a motion to approve a 100% student fee rate for the College Now program. Be sure we're clear. Okay, call the roll.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mr. Yatoni,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius.
Yes.
I guess Mr. McDermott can redo the budget now.
Thank you, Mr. Ashbaugh.
Oh, you're very welcome. One other thing I should have said before. In 2019, we had 228 kids that earned college credit. So you figure it's almost 1/3 of our kids earn college credit. So
Yeah.
Great.
I think the report that you put together, I mean, this took some time to find all this and put this together for us. I think it would be great to make sure the community knows that, how much this is benefiting our students
absolutely.
and how many take advantage of this and benefit from it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have discussion of COVID instructional learning plans. Mr. Cox, I know you started sliding into this during your
Mhm.
superintendent's report, so you shared a lot already, but
Yes.
is there more you'd like to discuss and
You know,
speak on now for this?
Just briefly, there's not a lot to report. Obviously, the rate in community spread outside of our walls is cause for concern. As we see the amount of cases increase, that's providing some challenges both internally and externally. The biggest challenge we're facing right now is making sure we can just continue to keep the school staffed. It is going to be reality, whether we're hybrid or in person, that we will have individuals quarantined, both students and staff. There's just no way to stop that. And that's not unique to Rochester. We're seeing that across the board. I've been meeting, I've had a lot of discussions with our administrative team. We have a standing weekly huddle where we meet briefly just to talk about where we are, how's it going, the issues. I've been doing that with our REA co-presidents as well. We've started to do a weekly huddle just to say, where are we? What are we doing? What concerns do we have? And then bi-weekly, a more in-depth meeting every other week with our REA leadership. I call it joint leadership. Mrs. Shaw, Mrs. Keller, myself, and our building reps and our REA officers. We've been getting together to talk about where we are and moving forward. I can tell you one of the things that we deal with, including the rising numbers, that's cause for concern within our community. But we also have celebrations that we know the mitigations within our schools are working. So what we're balancing now as a district is how do we care for the overall health and safety of our students, our staff, and our greater community as a whole, balanced with providing for the continuity of learning, which is also a high priority, and what are the negative impacts and looking at those negative consequences to our students, first and foremost, of them not being in school or having the option to be in school, especially those who need it. I'm very pleased and proud of the work that's happening with our at-risk students and students who need to be here, and the students we're offering full-time instruction to that are taking advantage of that. That's been a positive. While I'm on that piece, I had talked to the board previously that we are going to make that optional and that we would be looking at making that mandatory. The mandatory is on pause. I had talked about the State Board of Education being a potential hurdle to that I felt like we could clear, but there's two other hurdles since our last meeting that I ran across on that, and that would be our Office of Civil Rights and our insurance liability coverage. So it's going to take continued work with our State Board of Education to look to see if there's ways we can advocate for students who are not meeting certain academic criteria to have them mandatory come into school 4 days per week. And if they cannot, if there's a medical reason for them not to be able to do that, we have a process very similar to our homebound instruction process. With that being said, I'm not sure how necessary that may be because many of our students are taking advantage of the opportunity to come in. So as we move forward, it's balancing those pieces and then also looking at the reality of what our numbers in school look like. The communication I sent to our community, our staff, you all on Friday, as of that day, it changes daily. We're at about 0.5% of our people that were COVID positive at that time. Quarantined, I don't remember the exact number. It was certainly higher than that. Where we are today, we have 23. We have 23 individuals in our district that are COVID positive today. And we have 174 unquarantined out of the roughly 23 to 2,400, if you include substitutes and some other individuals that come in and out of our district. There's about 2,400 people that we are responsible for. So our mitigations are working, but there's also cause for concern on that. The next piece is we're also dealing with just the fear of the unknown and the anxiety piece. And that's real. Our people, our parents have to be confident in our safety measures. Our students have to be confident in those safety measures. And very importantly, our staff has to be confident in the safety measures. I can sit here today and tell you that if our positivity rate is or our number percentage of people positive is less than 1%. I can tell you that's great. I can tell you since August 17th, we've had 41 students test positive and 7 staff. Those are very good numbers, but it doesn't really mean anything if our people don't feel safe. So we have to continue to have those conversations, and it's really about communicating, and about what can we do. That's been a big piece of that conversation that we've had with our REA leadership about where are we and what can we do. To give you an example, if you would have talked to me a month ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe even 2 weeks ago. In fact, I can tell you for a fact 2 weeks ago because it was our last meeting. Together jointly, we said, can we move forward with in-person learning? The consensus was yes. The question was when? Let's look at January. I left that meeting, I told that group today thinking, hey, maybe there's a space we could try between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because we could come back from Thanksgiving. It's just 3 weeks approximately, and if it doesn't work, we have Christmas to reboot. I'm not prepared to make that recommendation today because of how things have changed and how drastically they've changed. So now we're in conversation about how can we move forward. The reality is we are going to move forward with in-person instruction. It's just when and what's that going to look like, and what do we need to do to make sure our staff and our students and our community feels as safe as possible. So we are engaged in depth in those conversations. While we make plans, and we are making plans, we're not afraid to call an audible either, like we just did over the past of these last 2 weeks. We would like to look at offering some form of full in-person instruction in January, either on the return of Christmas or the after the Martin Luther King holiday. The reason I say the Martin Luther King holiday is there's a lot of thought out there. It's not unique to us, but we're certainly discussing it, is we anticipate seeing a spike after Thanksgiving and after Christmas and New Year's, and giving that 2-week period either in a remote or hybrid format,
Yes.
to let things settle out and then try to move forward. Today, that's based on an assumption that that's true, but it's a reasonable and plausible assumption. And it would also be based on, it would help with that feeling of overall safety. I'm not ready to make a decision today, because in 2-3 weeks, we're going to have a little window after Thanksgiving break. We did see a spike after Halloween. It's reasonable to assume we'll probably see something occur in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So let's get past or 2 to 3 weeks. Let's get past the Thanksgiving break, see where we are. We have another board meeting to be able to talk and see how plausible, reasonable it does look to move forward. And if it doesn't, we can maintain where we are. And if things would regress, we can go on an adaptive pause. And that's the last piece that I'll explain, just so everybody's clear on an adaptive pause. That is the state's terminology for allowing us to go to remote learning in full or in part for a period of time. Typically, they could be longer or shorter, but typically an adaptive pause would be 2 days to 2 weeks. Anything much longer than that likely would be something that was health department or state advised. For us as a school, it could be a classroom, it could be an entire school, it could be multiple schools, it could be a district. We were really close to that. Like I said earlier, we were really close to doing an adaptive pause, had it just worked out differently with the way people were coming and going off of quarantines. So we do need our parents to be prepared for that could happen. It's advisable you have a backup plan. We see as schools move forward with in-person instruction, you have seen more quarantine and more adaptive pause type situations. I think the last piece I want the board to be keenly aware of is when we move forward to a full in-person instructional model, the social distancing goes down. You will have less distancing, and that is allowable within the plan. But the reality is, when there is a COVID positive case, there would be a greater chance for quarantine. What we know about our quarantines today, the individuals who are quarantined as close contact are not turning up COVID positive, which is a good thing, but it's still a reality, and it's still very difficult for everyone whenever we are doing the quarantines.
Mr. Cox, I know there's been some great news the last couple of weeks about, vaccine with 2 great trials. Has the state reached out to you, the teachers being on the front line? I think they're probably prioritized in that. And the news is very hopeful that even at, before the end of the year, they'll start to be able to distribute. Has there been any discussion about that or how that might impact your future planning?
From the state to school districts or the bargaining units, statewide bargaining units, I'm unaware of any conversation. I've heard the conversation going the other way is please prioritize educators along with frontline workers, or I'm sorry, frontline healthcare workers and whatnot. That being said, and I don't know, I mean, obviously this is, pioneer territory for everybody. I still see some challenges. There is great news with the vaccine, but when you look at the logistics of getting them out and then getting people to take them, I think that's still going to have to be an individual decision for people making that available to them. Would be even our own workers that would be available, right. But I don't see how we could mandate individuals to take that. I certainly would hope it would be available to educators first and foremost because of the priority of education and some of our first responders, healthcare workers, those individuals that are really in it every day. But more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I heard today there was a second vaccine.
No, the Moderna one came out and it was solved a lot of the problems the first one did as far as distribution. So I think it's
good.
It was almost a 95% effectiveness. So very hopeful news.
2 doses again?
It was 2 doses, but it was only minus 20 degrees, unlike the other one that was minus 80. And that minus 20 fits with the current refrigeration that's available. And it also has a shelf life, I think, of 30 days.
That would be much better.
So they have doses. I forget how many they said they'll have beyond the end of the year, but they said they'll be able to start to distribute them, they think, by the end of December to frontline workers. So very hopeful news.
I know this isn't something that you all haven't talked about with your district administrators and everything, but when you're looking at the possibility of full instruction, whenever that time comes after the new year, the classroom size and the number of teachers that we have that have 0 students who are remote,
yes.
Who have 13 kids on Orange Day and 10 or 11 kids on Blue Day. And then we have some small classrooms,
Yes.
so I know it's a whole new level of brainstorming to figure out how to help make things more secure in there or how to use extra space that we might have in the district too to help with that. But I know that's important.
That's certainly a great level of concern, especially for those teachers in those rooms. And there's not a lot of extra fluff. There's probably some things we could get out of the way. A surprise to me is when you're going around and looking in classrooms, and especially as you go into the elementary, whereas Dr. Maguglia said there's less remote students, so you get a better picture of what it looks like. Mm-hmm. You would think the intermediate school would be the most conducive because of its size and it's just a nice building. But interestingly enough, in the downstairs, the upstairs is better, though we have tables, so that's a bit problematic. But the downstairs classrooms, the geothermal units, there's a geothermal unit in the corner of every classroom, which takes up quite a bit of square footage for the classroom. Those classrooms downstairs are smaller than you think. So when you add 23 plus or minus bodies in there, you certainly will not be social distancing at 6 feet. There's no way. Now, can we look at areas with larger classes where they have few to no students remote and look at different areas? Yes, we can, but it's going to be to a limited extent depending on the building and whatnot. So yeah, we will continue to discuss and look at that.
At the high school, you talking about social distancing and the issues there. When you move from one classroom to the other after your block 8, are you still planning on the same number of periods per day, just shorter? Or would you think about just having a morning class and an afternoon class, and then at the middle of the semester, you take your second class in the morning and your second class, and over the semester, you covered the same material, but you didn't have any hallway time in there?
one of the passing periods, believe it or not, have not been an issue
Oh, okay.
for us. Even talking with our healthcare professionals, our nurses here locally, because the students are spending such little time
Yeah, not
in the
15
hallway and they're
minutes.
masked up, we're not using lockers. The hall, it really, you would be stunned if you were in school today. Even though we have kids in person, it's still very low traffic in terms of hallway time. But to answer that question, we're not necessarily looking at our buildings all needing to do the same thing and having the same needs,
Right.
because we have such disparities in the number of students who are remote at the high school level versus at our elementary levels, between the independence, between a lot of things, educational ability to, obviously it stands to reason an 11th grader is going to get along better on remote learning than a first grader. So we're not looking at those. We're looking at those two different levels, elementary to junior, senior high, differently. We do have, as stated earlier in the meeting, over 300 students that are remote at the high school and probably growing. When you combine that with the kids who are quarantined, we're looking about half of our kids out. It is a heavy, heavy lift for our teachers to balance that in-person instruction with that high number of remote learners. So we're discussing about how we can best approach that. It's likely going to cause an alteration of what our original plan was. Our original plan for in-person instruction with limited remote was 4 days a week full. That's likely not going to be the path we can go, because if we go 4 days a week full at the high school, I'll just use them for example right now, there's not going to be any time left for the remote learners. The other thing that we're seeing that's an unexpected, it was just an unexpected byproduct of where we are, is in some instances, especially the older at the higher grades, in some instances, our number of students in a class is small enough, it's just changed the whole instructional methodology. Teachers are rethinking and relearning how to reach and teach those students, but also they're getting through material during a specific class period more quickly. So that great length of amount of time for the block isn't necessarily effective whenever you have 6 kids in a class, compared to if you had 25 or 26 kids in that class. It just looks completely different. So that may cause us, one of the things we've discussed is, can we bring our students in the morning, do that in-person instruction, and then leave the afternoon to really focus on those remote learners in the afternoon. Now,
Not trying to do them same time.
Yes, same concept.
That's what I hear is bad.
One of the other things we're starting to see, we have much lower numbers, much lower at the elementary. However, just this week, and it's been reported multiple times today, that we're starting to see an increase in the amount of elementary students going remote, but for a different reason. We're starting to see that because, one, I think what's happening in the greater surrounding community, but also people are making decisions based on the holidays and trying to do some self-quarantine for holidays in terms of making sure they can do what they need to do, whether it's family, whether it's travel and whatnot. So we are starting to see an increase. So that's going to be a change to what we were talking about originally at the elementary levels, because before we thought we could handle that with the low numbers, but if those numbers would grow too much, we're going to have some discussions, and it may not look just like the high school, but we certainly are going to have to talk about it, because that's what we're seeing from an instructional level. Just trying to serve both well at the high numbers of remote is very, very difficult. And it's not for a lack of trying. It's just something that was unexpected whenever we first entered this.
I really like the idea of purifying. You're either doing remote or you're doing in person. That'd be a big load off the teachers, I would think.
Yes, and there's no way at the high school, junior and senior high, there's no way to do a remote only teacher because of the content specialty of it, because of the AP, the dual, just all of those different things. You really can't do that. Could you do that at the elementary? Yes, we've discussed it, but everybody has agreed at the moment that may not be the best path, though if we had to revisit it, we would. But we're just looking at different options there.
Thank you.
Right.
Anything else? All right. We'll move on to the ISB Resolutions Delegate Assembly. Mrs. Reynolds, are you on the call? And would you speak to this?
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute off. Yes, it went very smoothly. Since they had all the discussion at 2 previous Zoom meetings, Saturday was really just the voting. And I was pleased because all the votes ended up going the way the committee recommended. There was one that I thought was a little controversial. That was that they were wanting school boards to get behind pushing for a law that any gun in a household with someone under 18 would have to be locked up. And while I would hope that people with children under 18 would do so, I didn't think that there was something school boards needed to be getting involved in. I don't think we need to be involved in telling people what to do in their own home. And the majority of the school board delegates agreed. All the other resolutions were pretty straightforward, things that we've talked about in the past. And like I said, I thought it went well.
Thank you. Okay, new business. We have Board of Education committee updates. These minutes were included in your packets. Is there any discussion on these? We had, oh, my computer froze on me. Building, finance, extracurricular. That's it. Yep. Okay. Adoption of a resolution regarding estimated amounts necessary to be levied for the year 2020. Mr. McDermott, will you please address this?
Yes, in your packet, you'll see the resolution regarding the estimates that the Finance Committee discussed. On the first page, those items that are listed, each of those funds, those are considered corporate and special purpose funds. The amount you see at the $10,922,000 does not include the debt service levy. That's further down. But some of this information, as I go through it, that second page is the page that will be published in the paper. That kind of gives a little bit of an explanation as to what real estate tax monies we received for last year in comparison to what we're estimating this year. It's kind of a convoluted process for us to estimate the levy in December when we have no idea what the actual EAV number is going to be, which really drives our estimations. But for December, we're estimating an amount and not a rate. We won't know what that ending tax rate will be until the spring, but that $10,922,826 number is an estimate, and that is based upon an EAV increase of approximately 7.9%. The overall extension increase would be 7.3%, and the EAV numbers and the new property numbers we used in our estimates, the existing property would be estimated at $304.1 million, and new property would be estimated at 2.1. Overall, the estimated extension would be $13,236,061. I believe will be in the end a little bit closer to 12.7 to 12.9 million. But that is all determined based upon our actual EAV increase and the new property that comes into the district and on the tax rolls. For debt service, you can see that we levied last year at $2,236,264. This year we're levying for $2,313,235, which is net of a $300,000 abatement from our sales tax revenue going towards that debt service. Last year, that 2.2 million number also included a $300,000 abatement. So actually our debt service payments for this year will be 2.613 million. On the second page of that report, that just goes through and compares last year's actual extension to what our estimates are at this point. And again, we are levying for dollars. The main reason why we have to do that is to ensure that when spring comes and the EAV number is known, that we don't leave any funds on the table that we're actually able to access, because we are tax capped. So there is only a certain amount of funds that we can access, but we want to make sure at this point that we don't underestimate, because then we never would receive those funds going forward. They would be gone forever for the district. So any questions?
Bob?
Yeah.
Just a point, our budget hearing probably won't be in the Bruce Hayes Center, will it?
I'm sorry?
On the notice in the paper,
Correct.
it says the hearing is going to be held at the Bruce Hayes Administration Center.
Right.
That's
We can
probably not
adjust
true.
that if
Yeah.
that meeting is going to be here or remote. Right.
I just think it's probably not going to be there, is it?
So this particular estimation or levy will require a truth and taxation hearing, which is basically just to explain this process again.
What you just said, over.
For just one point of note, I just want to make for our new board members, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Carley, to be very clear, the truth and taxation hearing, if you were asked about it, we are not raising the taxes by the amount listed. It's just an overestimate to ensure that we're capturing any tax dollars that we're entitled to get. If for any reason we would underestimate that amount, we would not collect the tax dollars, and we do not get them back. I don't know where they go, but they don't come to us. So it's just a very conservative nature that school districts do it. So anytime you go over 4.9% estimate, you have to do the truth and taxation hearing. The school thought is, if you're going to do a truth and taxation hearing, don't do it at 5.5%, really elevate it. I shared a story at finance committee that one time in my career, I inherited it. Luckily, I wasn't recommending it, but the district did do a truth and taxation hearing at 5.some-odd%, and they were off, and they left just a little bit of money on the table, and they'd even went through the process of the truth and taxation hearing. So we are not raising the tax rate. It's just capturing the dollars we're entitled to receive. Raising the tax rate requires us to go through a process with the voters.
And in the paper.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I always thought it's odd that we levy in dollars and not levy a rate.
Yes.
It seems like more logical you'd levy your rate, but you'd levy in dollars. And then they calculate the rate based on our levy.
Yes.
Will we put that usual ad in the paper that tries to explain this to folks?
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution regarding estimated amounts necessary to be leveled for the year 2020?
So moved.
Thank you.
Should let Bill do it.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Mr. Carley,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Dr. Magulius,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds.
Yes.
Okay, we have the approval of bids for snow and ice removal. Who's speaking on this?
And I can speak on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Allwell and I look at this service every couple of years, and this year we decided to bid that out as one of our professional services being done for the district. Unfortunately, we only received, I guess, one bid back, which is our current vendor. We did receive another bid, but it was late after the deadline, so we could not accept that particular bid. So the bid from Clean Cut Lawn Care is who we have had for the last number of years. The rates that were listed in your packet have been the same rates for the last 2 years. So that bid did not increase from what we were paying last school year. So it's our recommendation to accept that bid for this school year.
A couple things on this, Bob. Number one is there, as far as I know, there's no rule that says we need to go out, take something out to bid on an annual basis or every 2 years or anything like that. The other one is that some of the people that might be bidding on this, unless they get a specific invitation to bid, they may not see it, they may not know it, they may assume that we're going to stick with who we've got. I assume won't be on the board next time this goes out to bid, but I would encourage the board to encourage you next time around to put this out for bid next year, because we should be able to get more than one bid on something like this in a county this size. We just may need to do a little bit of working the phones a bit to let some of these folks know that the invitation is out there.
Correct. And Mr. Allwell did contact, I believe, 3 other companies. We did send out packets to those that we contacted directly, but we did not receive any other requests other than those. So we'll continue to do that. Yes.
Was the late one lower or higher than this one?
Higher, and it was bid as a total dollar cost for the year, and that's not what those documents bid out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And the service has been fine. Right?
we have had
Oh,
some discussion with the current vendor on certain issues throughout
really? I didn't know.
yeah,
Okay, I'm
the
sorry.
last school year or last season.
All right.
It's also a good local person. It's a Rochester graduate.
Okay.
But I think those issues were corrected when
Good.
Mr. Allwell addressed them.
Is there a motion to approve the bid for snow and ice removal?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Dr. Magoulias?
Yes.
Mr. File?
Yes.
Mr. Goebel?
Yes.
Mr. Utoni?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Carly?
Yes.
Okay, so now we have the approval of the PK through 3rd music curriculum recommendation. Thank you, Mrs. Keller.
All right. So the Curriculum and Instruction Council met on October 29th and had the opportunity to review the music play curriculum proposal from the elementary campus. What this curriculum allows, it's an online dashboard that would allow our 2 music teachers at the elementary campus a multitude of resources, lessons that are aligned to the national and Illinois music standards. And the scope and sequence covers the key areas, and those are mapped out in the recommendation that you've been provided. But with that, as you know, one of the goals of the school improvement plan for the elementary campus really focuses on enhancing the remote learning model, and of course hybrid as well. And so given the fact, they were able to tie in the health and safety of students and just teaching music right now as well, this is a real opportunity for all of our students, whether they're in person or remote. And again, for our teaching staff, the resources are unbelievable. You can actually go on their website and see and kind of tour. So you might be interested in doing that as well. But something we also discussed as a council is the opportunity moving forward. So we'll have our elementary music teachers utilizing this program. And it might be something that we want to look at expanding even towards the intermediate school if we feel it's successful with the elementary campus. So there's room for growth there too, which I think is exciting, as well as then consistency too across the board.
Any questions?
Is there any downsides at all?
No,
I don't think so. I don't
it's
see
the whole new
any.
us, right?
Nothing but goods. $150.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the PK through third music curriculum recommendation?
So moved.
Second,
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Reynolds,
yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias,
Yes.
Mr. File.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lost my mask. All right. Before we move into closed session, we can try to take care of miscellaneous now for everyone. Are there any items from anyone for miscellaneous? Okay, I have three quick ones. One of them is, it was in our packet, but I don't think it was said out loud here yet. And a big congratulations to John Schwartz.
Yeah.
For his 2020 Rochester Citizen of the Year recognition. Yeah. Awesome. Second is, thank you, Katie, for getting the gifts together for American Education Week. One of the things I love about that week is it honors all educators, everyone who works in the field of education for the benefit of students. So thanks for getting those together for us. And that leads to the last one is, Katie, thank you for your great service to the board over the last several years. You're going to be missed, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Big time.
But I
You're going to
vote
make
no.
me cry.
All right. Let's see. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, and security procedures, school building safety and security, and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual, a threatened, or reasonably potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, the public, or public property.
So moved.
Thank you. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, call the roll.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias.
Yes. Let's see. I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel report.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Utoni,
Yes.
Dr. Magoulias,
Yes.
Mr. Carly,
Yes.
Mr. Goebel,
Yes.
Mr. File,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds.
Yes.
Okay, is there anything else to come before the board? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 9:13, meeting adjourned.